Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. As part of the Rankin Technical College AWD or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD1100 C# Programming Fundamentals class, I've been going through a series of video presentations based on the textbook for the class, which as you can see is Murox C# 2015. I am into section 3 and I just did my first lecture on Chapter 12, how to create and use classes. So I'm going to continue on to there. We had been talking about a product class. So this is one way that that product class could be created. All right. Now, a couple things to notice. What we have in here, and there'll be more things, notice there. All right. So notice there's about 4 more pages, but let's take a look at what and start with what we have here. This namespace product maintenance is, for lack of better words, that's going to be the project name, typically. That's your namespace. So this is kind of a folder hierarchy. So inside of that product maintenance namespace, we have a class that is public, which means that that class can be called by other classes, and the class is named product. If you remember earlier in the last lecture, when I gave you my very quick little definition of object orientation, I said private data manipulated by public methods. So here's our private data. As we saw earlier, the string representing a unique product code, a string representing the product description, and a decimal representing the product price. We also have 2 different constructors here. A default constructor, which as you can see does nothing. Notice with the constructor, because it's very unique, constructors are public, constructors do not return a value, and they can be overloaded. In other words, when I create a new product, I either must pass it nothing, or I must pass it a string, and a decimal. And also, I'm not doing any kind of validation in here right now. So if I left the string, I passed the empty string for the code and an empty string for the description and a negative value for the price, that's what the values of that product would hold. Typically not what you want. All right. So here are our variables. Now notice code, description, and price, all lowercase. But when you actually create these are typically referred to as getters and setters. Getters return the current value of a variable. Setters allow you to set the value of the variable. So when you create these getters and setters like this, now the first letter of the name becomes capitalized. But when you use it, notice we're returning code, we're returning that, or we're setting that. And you see we've got a similar one for the description. Both of these are public string, followed by the name of the variable, but with an uppercase letter. And then we've got price, which is a little different, because rather than returning a string, we're returning a decimal. And value is basically, for lack of better words, it's a keyword, which just means whatever you end up passing in, that's going to set the price to that, or attempt to. Here's our get display text. So you've got some kind of a separator, which again could be a blank space, a comma, a tab, a new line, I don't know. But it will display on screen the code that you set here. It's going to get that code, then get that description, then get that price. That's exactly what this is doing. So here's a couple products that they've created. Notice in both cases they're using this constructor right here. How do I know that? Because they're passing in 3 values. The code, the description, and the price. The code, the description, and the price. So here we're declaring this first line. This is an important concept. This first line here is declaring two product objects, product 1 and product 2. It is not instantiating them. When you instantiate or create an instance, you need the new keyword. So product 1 is a new product. CS15 represents the code. Murox C# 2015 represents the description. And $56.56 decimal represents the price. And similar with product 2. You can set them up like this, or you can set them up like this, which is what many programmers do by using what are called object initializers. Sometimes people like this because you can really see then that code goes with this, description goes with this, and price goes with this. But either will work. The dialog box for creating a class, all you do is you come in. This was the debug thing I did earlier, but this is a console application. If I want to add a new class in here, I'm going to right mouse click on the name of my project and choose add, and I can do either a new item and do class, or there's a little bit of a shortcut. Right mouse click, add, and go down to the bottom here and put in class. So notice if I do that and I type the word product in here like we just looked at, all right, what that's going to do is it's going to create a brand new file in here called product.cs, and there is my class. So this is very similar to the one that's shown in the book, except I have a different namespace. But I could come in now and add literally all of this code that you see right here. And what you'll notice is I could grab every bit of this. Oops. Paste that in. Now I'm going to get some errors because it's not complete yet. Don't worry about that. We'll fix it. All right. And I can keep going here. So let's see. Slide. So I've got all that in. Okay. Oops. I could bring in this. And once I start bringing in this, I could just copy this, and instead of code, I could put here description. And then finally, I could add it one more time and put in here price. Now, that price is a decimal. All right. Now what you should notice, I may have a, I'm guessing here that I have a curly brace missing. But if you look, I now have no errors. So that's virtually the same code that I put in there. All right. So I got that. I can actually put in this also, which is my method that will read in, or I should say really rather than read in, which will display everything that's in my class. There we go. All right. So again, I can come through here and do this. Normally I would do this in another file. I would have like a driver, and that driver would either do this or do this. All right. Again, I suppose I should show you that, whoops, just for completeness sake. And what I'll do is I'll just grab all of this. I'm going to come in here. Hopefully I won't make any mistakes. I'm going to again right mouse click on here, choose add, choose class. I'm going to call this product driver. All right, so there's my two products. And it's giving me an error. It says that it's not known. Generate class product 1 in new file. Generate class product 1. Was not giving me errors here on that line. Modifier new is not valid for this item. Method must have a return type. Well, I'll work on that in just a moment. All right. Okay. Slideshow from current slide. So we added the class, starting code for the new class, examples of field declarations. Okay. This is not the same thing because we didn't have a limit before or a quantity. All right, so let's look at this. Class that uses public fields. Well, you can do that too. Notice these fields are all public. Notice when you do that, the first letter is capitalized already. Now, many people think that that kind of breaks what object-oriented programming is about, and you should not do that. In other words, your variables should always be private. All right, I'm at 13 minutes, so I'm going to go just a couple minutes more. Now, when you do these getters and setters, if you've got both a getter and a setter, both of them, that means that you can read the property and you can write the property. So it's both readable and writable. If you've got a getter without a setter, it's readable, but it's not writable. So in other words, it's read-only. If you have, you can do the other one too, which is not shown here, which is no getter but a setter. You don't see that as often, but that would be a write-only property. Now notice with the getters and setters, when you use, you've got a statement that sets and a statement that gets. All right. When you're setting, what you're working with, the product's code, is on the left-hand side of an equal sign. When you're getting, it's on the right-hand side of an equal sign. All right. So they talk about public methods. We already looked at this one. Now notice this is called an overloaded method. It looks the same here and here, except when you overload a method, the list of parameters that you give must be different. Now you'll notice this has a string and this has nothing. I could have put an int in there, for example, that said how many parameters I was passing in or something else. So you can overload a method as many times as you want to or need to, but every time you overload that method, all right, that method then must have a different set either number or types of values inside of the parentheses. All right. So here's an example of calling that getDisplayText. Okay. And with a \T, so you're going to have a tab between each field. Here you'll have nothing between each field. All right. Now, when you start to work with this stuff, the IntelliSense will kick in and should have some understanding of what it is you're trying to work with. Constructor, I already mentioned, is a special method that is called when the object is instantiated. Here's an example of an overloaded constructor. In the first case, it's what's typically referred to as a no-arg constructor because there are no arguments in the parentheses. In the second example, we're passing in a string representing the code, a string representing the description, and a decimal representing the price. We could overload it again and just pass in one thing, for example. All right, here's some examples of statements that call these constructors. All right, let's just do this, and then we'll finish up with this one. Default values for instance variables. What the heck is an instance variable? I'm going to jump way the hay back here. These are instance variables. Each instance of a product or each product object will have its own code, its own description, and its own price. If we don't give those values, then by default, anything numeric is default valued to 0. Anything Boolean that you don't give a value to defaults to false. Chars and objects default to null. And dates default to midnight, January 1st of the year 1. All right? So we'll come back and talk about a class that contains static methods in just a moment.